What the hell does a wedding cost these days? We might be able to let us know in the comments, but today a article came out and a wedding planner basically insisted that not an average wedding, but it's pretty typical for a wedding to cost around the $87,000 mark. Now, obviously I couldn't help but share this with 56,000 people on Instagram, and you can imagine that I have had upwards of 25 DMs within about 7 hours after going back on checking, and then the number of comments and stuff, and just raising different people's thoughts around the cost of weddings. But before we get into that, I find it really interesting whenever something like this comes up. People are really quick to want to tell you about why that's bullshit, and how this is my experience and this is what it costed us, and it's really fascinating. So for me, it shows that weddings are really, really important for people, because they recall all these memories about, we got the dress secondhand from here, we had our mates come to this, or they all did this, or ours was $5,000, there's no way you could spend 87. And people remember so many details from their wedding. But again, it's a reminder, just like I'm watching some cars go past that might be worth $5,000, there's other people driving around in $100,000 cars, and the people in the $5,000 car might even think the people spending $100,000 on the car are completely stupid, and why would you do that? You don't need to do that. One still gets you from A to B as much as the other does. What are you doing? You don't need that. But money at the end of the day is an energy flow from one party to another, and people decide what they value. They decide whether a $100,000 wedding is worthwhile to them or not. And it's not really up to us to tell other people what is or isn't worth money, because everybody has a different money personality. They have different values of money, and therefore they will decide themselves what they think is valuable. Some people will have the latest iPhone and get it every time. Some people will have flash shoes. Some people will have a plastic bag, if you're still allowed one of those. Probably not, because the green, I can't remember, someone got rid of them. Whilst others are like, no, I want a Birkin handbag, etc. So you see this everywhere when it plays out. But a wedding, I think, is one of those societal, pushed upon us type transactions that we should or must have in our life. And so many people go through it, therefore so many people want to talk about it. But inevitably, when something like this comes up, you get like clean thinkers who are like, well, hang on, this is a wedding planner who has said this, so therefore their clientele is probably people who are happy to spend a bit more, because if you can afford a wedding planner, then you can probably afford to spend more on a wedding. So that's where their brain goes to, which makes a lot of sense, right? But that's probably because those people are very busy, or they don't want to plan their own wedding, and so they are willing to use a wedding planner, and all the other reasons that people do use a wedding planner. But why do people buy back their time or use a wedding planner or a travel agent, etc.? Because they're busy doing what they're doing in their life, and so maybe they can make sense of paying somebody else to do it who's going to be better at it than they are, because their time is better used somewhere else themselves. So then maybe they can generate enough money to be able to make sense of doing it. Whereas some people are like, why would you even use a wedding planner? Why would you use a travel agent? It's a waste of money. And again, it's another good example of how we get to decide what is a good use of our money and what isn't. And trying to tell other people what is or isn't doesn't really work, because individually we all decide. Now, the other types of messages are people who want to tell you what a waste of money, because I think the stats that I've seen today, and these are pretty inaccurate, I'd have to go dig out the actual stats, but it's like 1 in 2 of these weddings that are costing $87,000 are potentially going to end up in divorce based on data. So is that a good use of your money? Well, again, it's up for each individual to decide. A really clean message came through being like, should probably do 77 grand on the wedding and put $10,000 into understanding each other better and counseling and things like that, to ensure that the wedding actually lasts, because you don't want to waste that money. And then someone else was like, nah, invest the whole money into the relationship and put a small amount aside for the wedding. Other people were talking about eloping. Weddings are just overpriced in New Zealand now. You get ripped off by people in the industry who are going to charge you more because they know that you're emotional about your transaction, so they're going to charge you more. So the messages are just never ending with different people's opinions. And I think this is why a stat like this or someone's thought or opinion is so controversial and so engaging, I guess, for other people, because it's something that a lot of people will go through in their life. So if I posted something up saying, right, the average business coach now thinks that spending $87,000 on your education of yourself over your lifetime is kind of the average spend now. People will be like, oh, I don't even know what the fuck that's about. What the hell? Who's got what? It's not engaging. But because it's a wedding and a highly, highly, highly emotional type subject, plus then weddings, lead to, marriages, then there's divorces and whatnot. So then people will lead to think, well, what was the point then of spending all that money? So you can see why it is highly, highly, highly engaging for people to talk about. But maybe you think that $87,000 is pretty fair for a wedding, whilst others of you won't think that it is. But again, we don't really get to decide. The market is the market is the market. The market decides. But what I do wonder with the bank of mum and dad in this day and age, and given that so much of the wealth is now held by older people, i.e. the bank of mum and dad, and they are one of the biggest borrowers for first home buyers, but also, helping people finance other things in their life, should the bank of mum and dad exist for children, whether they are spending more on their kids' weddings because they've got more wealth, so then they're willing to. So some of the people messaging me are like, we got married 20 years ago and ours cost 82 shillings and 3 fee jowers. And you're like, okay, epic, cheers for that. You probably brought a property on one income as well with 64 bedrooms and rented 3 of them out and now have 3 rentals or something too, right? But things are not really comparable to what they used to be because the world has changed so much. But then someone else messaged me and they said, well, I wonder if the spend is actually more now as well because of the extent of social media and how much content there is these days about the glam of a wedding, and it's a once in a lifetime and you want to make sure you really enjoy it and get the most out of it and all this sort of shit. So then we are sort of forced to be like, okay, we want to one up our mates or make sure that we do it like they did it and all these sorts of things. And so we get stuck in a status mode or a fear of not impressing people, so therefore like ego, and so then we're willing to spend the money on that with the belief, obviously, we need to show how important we are in society compared to our friends, etc. And it's the only time I'm going to do this when data actually tells us, yeah, I might have to do it again. Would people spend $87,000 a second time? I don't know. I'd love to see that data. For the people who get, maybe even some of you who have been remarried, did you spend as much money at your second or third wedding as you did at the first one? But I'd like to see some data on that, whether the spend decreases by the time you get to the second one. My intuition around how people spend, and from the study that I've done, would be no, people spend a lot less at that second wedding. Anyway, fascinating stuff, and one of those things that really gets people talking.